So let's begin. As we wind down 2024, a lot happened this year in Kentucky politics. In addition to being a budget year, the General Assembly was vocal on crime and on schools. We extensively covered House Bill 5, the Safer Kentucky Act, now law. We also spent a good bit of the year litigating the pros and cons of school choice as Kentuckians weighed Amendment 2. Kentucky's most well-known national politician, Mitch McConnell, has ended his tenure in Senate leadership. And the year also ends with many mainstay faces of the legislature not returning next year. So as we start to digest the year and sort of look back on what was achieved, accomplished, sort of where we're at, first, what will be the standout moments to each of you from this year in Kentucky politics?
I think when you look historically, it has to be the leader, Leader McConnell, announcing that he was going to be retiring from Senate leadership, the longest Republican leader in U.S. Senate history, and arguably one of, if not the most consequential leader of his party in U.S. Senate history. I think Leader McConnell's got a lot to look back on and be proud about. He's been incredibly substantial, not only in shaping national policy, but really helping the Commonwealth of Kentucky. You look from the coal fields in the east to the river ports in the west. He has really helped reshape the Commonwealth, both our economy, the investment in the economy. He's been a titan. So I think that has to be kind of the number one moment of the year, is him finally stepping away from leadership.
Yeah, a considerable voice from Kentucky. Jared, what about you?
I think my takeaway is that Governor Beshear's emergence on the national stage. Now, you can argue about electability via just geography alone, going on, but he is going to be in the conversation for people to try to challenge President Trump in 4 years, and I think that's a big thing for Kentucky to have a Democrat at that level. I also think you see state legislatures, wasn't a lot of change. I think it was a net zero in the House and nothing in the Senate. So I expect you're going to see more of the same that we've seen the past couple of years in Frankfort. So I don't think there's going to be too much change or too much turbulence.
Yeah, it's important to note there was that Veep stakes moment that, while I know that you've said before how there probably wasn't a chance that was ever going to happen, but the conversation certainly started. As we look ahead to, not just the next year, but the next 4 years, what do you see about the different strategies the governor may be taking to put more of his name out there in a national sense?
Well, he's going to probably continue doing what he did during the campaign, which was be a surrogate for Vice President Harris and going to rural places where he could talk to rural people. The Democratic Party was soundly rejected at the presidential level on the election day. Not so much everywhere else, though. You saw we kept some Senate seats that voted for Trump, but Democratic senators in Wisconsin, Michigan, Arizona, Nevada. Trump's popular vote total is below 50% now. And so I think it was not the big crisis that we all thought it was on election night for my side of the aisle, but I think there's some silver linings, and I think the governor is going to be out there looking to exploit those silver linings.
Anything you'd want to add on that?
Andy Beshear's already had an op-ed in the New York Times kind of outlining his vision for the Democratic Party. There's an open race right now for Democrat Party chair at the national level. I think that will give some guidance as to where the party might go for the next 4 years. And I think, Andy Beshear's got some national aspirations, whether those are real or kind of tilting at windmills, we'll see. But I think that he's got a place, if he wants it to be part of the conversation, to kind of pull the Democratic Party back into some of the rural areas. And at the very least, it may not be effective, but at the very least make an argument to rural voters that they should support Democrats.
Bringing it back here to statewide issues as we look ahead to the 25 session, what are some particular issues that you're already starting to see as the early leaders for possible things to define this particular session, or even some things left on the table from this past session that may get a lot of conversation?
I think that's the big thing, is there's a lot of task forces that were active during the 2023 interim that kind of got carried over. The two big ones, I think, are prison reform and how we pay for prisons, and also certificate of need reform. Both of those task forces were carried over. I think it's a short session, so a couple things happen. One, there's no budget, so that sometimes can ease things up to have more consensus, more agreement, because you're not also fighting over budget stuff. But at the same time, anything that taxes or expends money, it's a higher vote threshold to pass a bill. So there's some stuff that might get bound up because they can get 52 votes, but they can't get 60. So it'll be interesting to see. But I do think some of those task forces that we saw get carried over, they're more likely to have something happen this year than this coming year than they were this year.
I'd like to add housing. Housing was a big one they did as well, and I think that'll come back as well. Certificate of need. First of all, it's always a budget session, Trey. Whether it's an actual budget session or not, it's always a budget session. So, education is still going to be the big one. Voters spoke resoundingly against vouchers. So, what are they going to do with education funding? Are we going to look at the SEEK formula, which probably needs to be looked at? So some stuff like that as well is going to happen. But they always say it's a small session. We're not going to do a lot, and they'll still file 800 bills.
Well, and since you mentioned that, the last small session we had, I think it's important to remind viewers that in that session, that was the same one that we passed medical marijuana, we passed sports betting, and that was also the same session with Senate Bill 150. How likely is it that we may have an issue that kind of falls into one of those categories where it may not necessarily be as consequential, but may take a lot of the oxygen in the room?
I think
we're going to say the same thing. DEI.
I was staying in the schools, but I think with the defeat of Amendment 2, I think that there will be another look probably at charter schools, trying to figure out how to get those public charters up and running, because they've been technically authorized but none have opened. I think you'll see either an attempt to kind of go around and figure out what they can do inside of the law that we have as it currently stands, or see if they can get those public charters, which technically I think they're still in the courts. They're technically legal. I would think that you'll see a look at that.
They are legal. Anybody can open a public charter school at any time in Kentucky right now. Just a lot of people haven't done it because they want corporations to do it. And corporations, their bottom line is to make money, not to educate a workforce for tomorrow. I think DEI at the post-secondary education level is going to be the big one that gets everybody juiced up to fight. There might be a smaller K through 12 DEI as well, but I think that's going to be like what you said, the Senate Bill 150 or the last short session.
Yeah, and again, that was one of those things that was left on the table from this past session that you certainly may be seeing revisited again.